The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. This is Karen McGovern, Deputy Division Director of Legal Affairs for the Division of Professions and Occupations. I want to welcome you and thank you for attending this stakeholder meeting for the State Board of Veterinary Medicine Examiners. Today we are going to be talking about implementation of House Bill 20-1326. Before we get started, I want to take a minute and introduce staff members that are present and will help me facilitate the meeting. We have Karen Phelan, who is the program director for the State Veterinary Board, and we have Laura Bravo, who is a policy analyst with the division. I want to take a minute to thank you for your flexibility as we are transitioning to a 100% virtual platform in compliance with the governor's orders regarding the current pandemic. I know many of you have been to stakeholder meetings before, but I would like to reiterate the importance of your comments today. DORA makes decisions every day that may affect your life and business, and your input is vital in the rulemaking process. When we talk about the rulemaking process, the goal is to clarify and explain legislation. We want to ensure minimum competency to enter and to continue practicing in the field. And we want to provide only that regulation that's absolutely necessary for consumer protection without creating unnecessary barriers to the marketplace. And that last piece is particularly important as we talk today about the House Bill 2013-26, which is a red tape reduction act. And so I think it's that last piece is really important today. I want to just kind of go over some ground rules for any of you who've not participated virtually before. If you want to make a comment, you can raise your hand by using the hand icon. When we see your hand raised, we will unmute your line and call on you so that you can make comments. Some people don't prefer to make comments, speaking comments. And we do have an alternative where you can type your questions into the question box, and then I will read the questions or the comments so that the group benefits from everybody's input. When you are speaking or when you're typing in a question, please state your name and who you represent. We have a small group today, so I'm not going to put a time limit on comments, but want to remind everyone to be respectful and allow everyone the opportunity to speak, because it's really important that we hear all the opinions and all the views to make the best rule possible. If you're using the audio through your computer, please remember to put your phone on vibrate or turn them off. When you are using your computer or phone audio to speak, please try to keep background noise to a minimum. We can get a lot of feedback on this platform, and I want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to hear everything that's said. I'm going to start out by just going through the bill a little bit. This bill, as I said, is called the Red Tape Reduction Act. The purpose of it is twofold. One, this bill creates the Occupational Credential Portability Program, and it essentially takes place of what has been deemed endorsement through most of our licensing practice, most of our practice acts in the licensing section. And basically what they want to happen is they want the Division of Professions and Occupations to create a streamlined process for licensees who hold an active license in another state to endorse in for licensure. And we'll say that we have a pretty slick process already, but there's always room for improvement. In looking at this new bill, one of the biggest changes is we're used to the test is usually substantially equivalent qualifications. They changed the language, and now it is substantially equivalent experience and credentials, making sure that we're not creating barriers other than that. Essentially, to endorse in, what you're looking at is you have to hold an active license in good standing. in another state or territory of the United States. You can't have previous discipline or a conviction or anything else that violates the Practice Act. And then thirdly, you have to demonstrate substantially equivalent experience and credentials. So just making sure that, when we implement this bill, that we're really focused on those three prongs. The other piece of this bill, which is much of the reason that we're here today, is to talk about the regulation of military spouses. Through this new bill, a military spouse is entitled to receive a temporary license for a period of 3 years. That temporary license is at no cost to the military spouse, and that enables them to practice veterinary medicine in Colorado for those 3 years. At the end of the 3 years, the temporary license is non-renewable, and they would have to seek licensure in Colorado to remain practicing. So that was a mouthful. Does anybody have any comment before we start looking at the rules? Okay, I do not see any questions or hands raised, so we'll move on to the rules. The previous rules for veterinary, for the veterinary board, talked about the last iteration of the military spouse legislation, which allowed the military spouse to practice for a period of up to 1 year, their first year of residence, and then they had to apply for licensure. In this new bill, what we're saying is, we want to know you're here, we're going to give you this temporary license, which in effect is going to help practitioners, because a lot of institutions, even with the waiver, were leery of hiring someone who didn't at least hold this temporary license. So if we look at the new rule, basically just kind of setting out what the requirements are, which, as I spoke about, is that they'll have to provide satisfactory proof or information that, in fact, they are a military spouse, that their spouse is stationed in Colorado, and that they hold an active license in another state that's in good standing. So it can't be revoked or suspended or anything like that, and that they've not committed an act that violates the Veterinary Practice Act. And so, again, it's valid for 3 years after the date of issue, and may not be renewed. So pretty straightforward, but wanted to see if you all had any feedback, what you think, would you like to see less, would you like to see more? Really, now's the time for you to provide that feedback as we get ready to file this rule for permanent rulemaking. And again, the change is necessary because there is a rule that states the old requirements, and so we're going to have to update and change it to the new requirements.
Looks like Diane Matt has a hand raised.
Okay, great.
Diane, if you want to unmute your own line, we've unmuted you. Still says you're self-muted, Diane, if you want to. There you go. Go ahead.
All right, it looks like it's working pretty well this time. That's good. My name is Diane Matt, and I am here today representing the Colorado Veterinary Medical Association. And CVMA appreciates the opportunity to participate in the stakeholder meeting. And as you know, CVMA is the voice for Colorado's veterinary community concerning legislative, regulatory, and policy matters that pertain to veterinarians and the animals they care for. CVMA supports this rule as proposed. We agree that military spouses practicing in Colorado should be licensed. We also understand that most military assignments are 2 to 3 years long, and that time period is nicely covered in the proposed rule. So again, we support the proposed rule, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Does anyone else have any feedback or questions that they want to ask? I don't see anything. I would point out, we talked a lot at the beginning about the Red Tape Reduction Act and the endorsement. You don't see that up here as a rule because endorsements are laid out in the statute. And so there's no rule, there's no corresponding rule for the Board of Veterinary Medicine. And so that's why we're looking at just the rule regarding regulation of military spouses. So happy to entertain any questions, any comments. If not, I can take my screen down and I'll look so that I can give you the dates for next steps. Let's see, I'm gonna look here. It looks like we will file these rules with the Secretary of State on September 15th, and that the rulemaking will be held on October 15th at 8:45 a.m. If we don't have any further comments, I was gonna look up here and just make sure that we don't have, want to make sure that I didn't miss anything. Looks like there is a rule, and I'll share the screen. There is a rule for licensure by endorsement. I misspoke, but it is broad and essentially is in line with the current requirements. And so no changes are necessary to implement the new law from my perspective, but I have it up on the screen, and if anyone has a different perspective, I'm happy to entertain that feedback. Okay, it looks like Diane Matt has her hand raised.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, that's great. This is a related question. Are the rules that you're showing on your screen the most recent revision of the veterinary rules, or are we still waiting for those to be published?
Those haven't been published yet, and so because they're not in effect. So the rules I'm showing here, but the rules weren't changed through the last rulemaking, so they are the most current version of these two rules.
Okay, but because we had a rulemaking hearing on the 20th of August, and I've been watching for those rules, and I'm hearing you say that those have not been published yet. Is that correct?
No, right. So when we have a rulemaking hearing, those rules get adopted, but then there's a legal process that has to happen, and then they go into effect typically around 6 weeks after the adoption date. And once we get all the boxes checked, then they'll be published.
Got it. Thank you. I just wasn't sure what that,
Sure.
that time frame was.
Yeah,
making that happen.
Yeah, there's a lag.
Sure. There's a lot of I's to be dotted.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Sure. And so again, just following up, I don't see any other questions or comments. Looking here, just again to reiterate the date, the rules will be filed on September 15th, and then the rulemaking hearing will be on October 15th, 2020 at 8:45 a.m. If after you leave the meeting, you think of something or you decide that you do want to provide additional feedback, please send your written feedback to Dora, D-O-R-A _ DPO _ at rulemaking. I'm sorry, let me start over. It's Dora, D-O-R-A _ DPO _ rulemaking at state.co.us. Okay, well, I don't see that we have any further comments, so I really appreciate your time this afternoon. And so we're going to sign off. Have a good afternoon.